You don't own the factory. You don't work the machines. But every click, scroll, like, and emotion you express online is labor. And someone is getting rich off it. Welcome to the digital age, where your data is the new oil, and you are both the worker and the product. Let's begin with a question that might seem strange in its simplicity: what gives something value? For most of human history, the answer was clear: labor. Physical effort, craftsmanship, production. Whether you were hammering steel in a factory or tilling soil on a farm, value came from your hands, your sweat, your time. But something has shifted. Radically. In the 21st century, value no longer lives in the factory. It lives in the click of a mouse, the pause before scrolling, the search bar, the emoji reaction, the GPS ping, the tone of your voice. In short, value lives in your data. This isn't just an evolution of capitalism, it's a full-blown mutation. A silent revolution that has transformed every tap, swipe, and like into economic fuel. So, how did we get here? Let's rewind a bit. From factories to feeds. The Industrial Revolution taught us that machines could amplify labor. One worker plus one machine could now do the work of 10. The factory became the sacred temple of capitalism, and labor, the physical, visible kind, was its lifeblood. Marx, Smith, Ricardo, they all focused on labor as the source of value. Then came the service economy, offices, desks, telephones, and paperwork. Labor became less about lifting and more about thinking. Still, the worker remained at the center. If you weren't producing goods, you were producing services. Either way, your effort created value. Now, fast forward to today. What does Amazon actually produce? What does TikTok manufacture? What raw materials does Google refine? None, at least not in the traditional sense. They produce and refine attention, influence, behavior, and insight. And their factories? They're made of code and servers. They're workers. That's the twist: we are the workers, whether we know it or not. Platforms as the new factories. Let's talk about platforms. You've heard the names 1,000 times: Facebook, Amazon, Google, TikTok, Apple. These are not companies in the old school sense. They don't churn out products in assembly lines or own giant warehouses filled with raw materials. Instead, they are platforms, digital ecosystems designed not just to host content, but to capture and monetize the user experience itself. Platforms don't need employees in the traditional way. Why hire a photographer when millions will upload their vacation photos for free? Why hire a music reviewer when algorithms can scan listening habits and write personalized summaries? Why hire a clerk when you can automate checkout and shipping? More importantly, why pay a factory worker when every user is producing valuable data every second? Let's take Amazon as an example. It has invested billions in automation, from warehouse robots to predictive shipping algorithms. It tracks what you browse, how long you look at a product, when you abandon your cart, and even what colors you're most likely to click on. All of this data is fed into machine learning systems that optimize every aspect of the platform, for one goal: maximize profit. The labor has shifted. It's invisible, distributed, and constant. The new exploitation: spirit and signal. So, if platforms are the new factories, what is the new form of exploitation? It's no longer about how many hours you work or how many units you produce. It's about how much behavioral surplus you unknowingly generate. That's a term coined by Harvard professor Shoshana Zuboff in her groundbreaking work, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. Here's the basic idea: every action you take online, every search, every pause, every scroll, is captured, analyzed, and turned into predictive data. Most of this information you never consented to give. It's inferred, deduced, predicted. Your online life is transformed into a psychological profile that can be sold, targeted, and manipulated. You think you're choosing what to watch, what to buy, what to read. In reality, algorithms already know what you're likely to choose. They're not showing you content, they're showing you yourself, filtered, mirrored, and packaged for maximum monetization. This is not just surveillance, it's behavioral control. And it's more effective than any boss, any factory whistle, any time card ever was. You never clock in. You never clock out. Yet you're always working. The disappearance of the worker. The irony of this new system is that while everyone contributes, no one is truly recognized as a worker. You upload photos, post thoughts, comment on friends' achievements, all for free. You even train the AI that will eventually replace traditional jobs. Your content teaches machines how humans speak, react, and feel. But you're not paid for this labor. You're not unionized. You have no benefits. No representation. No recognition. The modern digital economy has atomized the labor force. Gig work replaces full-time employment. Creators hustle for algorithmic favor. Everyone becomes an independent contractor, a brand, a product. We are all fragmented, individualized, and disconnected, making collective bargaining nearly impossible. In this economy, your identity is the commodity. The hidden empire of data. We often think of data as a byproduct, something we generate passively. But to the tech giants, data is the product. And whoever owns the most data owns the most power. Think about it. Data determines which ad gets shown, which product trends, which candidate wins, which community is targeted for policing, which student gets a loan, which doctor a patient sees. This is no longer just business, it's social engineering at a global scale. And unlike oil or gold, data doesn't run out. It compounds. It grows in real time. It feeds itself. The corporations that control data have more influence than many governments. They don't just respond to markets, they shape them. We're taking a closer look at how the world's most powerful companies operate not as traditional manufacturers, but as platforms. These are the new factories, and what they produce is intangible. It's influence, attention, behavior, and value from every interaction we make online. Let's get one thing straight, a platform isn't just a website or an app. It's an economic model. A platform is a digital infrastructure that hosts interactions between users and captures those interactions as data. Think of Facebook, Google, Amazon, TikTok, Uber, not as service providers, but as environments that shape human behavior for profit. In the 20th century, value came from physical production. In the 21st, it comes from extraction. Not of minerals or labor hours, but of user behavior. Consider this, Facebook doesn't create content, it provides the tools and environment for you to create it. Google doesn't write answers, it uses your questions to refine the world's largest prediction engine. TikTok doesn't dance, but it analyzes billions of videos to know which ones you'll watch next. All of these platforms collect data from their users and convert it into economic value. That's why the real assets of these companies aren't buildings, or machines, or even employees. Their most important asset is their data pipeline, the uninterrupted flow of behavioral data being collected, processed, and monetized. 24/7 value extraction. Think about how a factory works. There are shifts, work hours, quotas, supply chains. But a digital platform never sleeps. It extracts value from users 24 hours a day, every day, worldwide. The more time you spend on the platform, the more data you generate. The more data they have, the better their algorithms get. The better the algorithms, the more time you spend. It's a feedback loop, a perpetual machine fueled by human attention. Here's the kicker: you're not being paid for any of this labor. On the contrary, many of us pay them, with subscriptions, purchases, or time, just to participate. Platforms also leverage automation to scale this model. AI manages recommendations. Algorithms control visibility. Chatbots handle customer service. Logistics systems make delivery seamless. The workers of this new factory aren't human, they're models and servers. But the raw material? That's still you. Platforms don't hire, they control. Traditional businesses hire workers to produce goods or deliver services. Platforms, on the other hand, often externalize labor entirely. Let's break this down. Amazon relies on a vast logistics network, but its profit margins come from the algorithmic precision of its data systems, knowing what you'll buy before you buy it, and nudging you toward that decision. Uber doesn't employ drivers, they're independent contractors, navigating a platform that constantly adjusts prices, routes, and incentives based on machine learning. YouTube doesn't pay most creators a salary. Instead, it uses algorithms to promote videos that keep people watching longer, and only a fraction of the ad revenue trickles back to the content creators. This model creates what some economists call platform capitalism. The platform is the middleman, the controller, and the extractor, all at once. And it turns everyone, worker, creator, consumer, into data laborers. The illusion of freedom. Here's where it gets more complex and darker. Platforms sell the idea of freedom. You're free to browse, post, buy, create, watch, comment. But this freedom is algorithmically managed. You think you're choosing, but your choices are being shaped, subtly, constantly, by invisible metrics and machine-generated nudges. Everything from the colors of buttons to the speed of notifications is designed to keep you engaged. And not just for fun, because engagement equals data, and data equals profit. The result is a workplace where you don't even know you're working. Where you're not a customer, you're the product. And unlike a factory, where workers might organize, protest, or strike, platform users are fragmented and isolated. We don't see ourselves as laborers, we see ourselves as users. But that's the genius of the system. It extracts value without resistance, because it disguises labor as leisure. Metrics over meaning. The rise of platforms has brought with it a culture of metrics. Everything can be tracked: impressions, click-through rates, engagement time, conversions, churn rates, retention curves. In traditional work, success might be measured by quality, efficiency, or satisfaction. On platforms, success is measured by optimization. Did the algorithm work better today than yesterday? Did it keep users on the site 3 seconds longer? Did it increase ad impressions by 2.7%? These numbers determine what we see, what we do, what we care about. Even human experiences, like dating, music discovery, reading, or watching movies, are governed by algorithms designed not to enrich, but to predict and influence. In a very real way, platforms have replaced cultural institutions. We no longer browse bookstores, we scroll Amazon. We don't rely on DJs, we use Spotify algorithms. We don't ask friends for recommendations, we trust the YouTube homepage. The result? A world where value is driven not by what something is, but by how well it performs within the system. Who owns the factory now? Let's pause and ask the big question: if platforms are the factories, and users are the labor, who owns the means of production? The answer is a tiny number of people and corporations. A handful of tech giants control most of the digital infrastructure we rely on. Their algorithms are trade secrets. Their data is proprietary. Their influence is global. And because platforms scale with near zero marginal cost, these companies grow rapidly without needing to hire more people. In fact, they often grow by replacing human workers, through automation, AI, and outsourcing. In the past, factory owners needed labor to produce value. Today, platform owners need only your attention, your data, and your compliance. It's an entirely new kind of capitalism, one built not on labor exploitation, but on participation exploitation. We're looking at a more subtle, more insidious form of exploitation, one that doesn't just target your time or behavior, but your spirit, your emotions, and your sense of self. We often think of exploitation as something external. Harsh working conditions, low wages, physical exhaustion. But in the digital age, exploitation has moved inward. It's no longer about extracting labor from your body, it's about extracting value from your mind. Today's digital platforms are built to do one thing incredibly well: keep you engaged. That may sound harmless. After all, engagement seems like a neutral word. But under the surface, it means that every second you spend on a screen is being measured, optimized, and turned into profit for someone else. You might ask, what's the harm? Isn't it just entertainment? Not quite. Behind the scenes, your emotional state, your moods, preferences, political beliefs, even your vulnerabilities, are being tracked, tested, and manipulated in real time. Let's say you're feeling anxious. You scroll through Instagram, hoping for distraction. The algorithm notices the type of posts you're stopping on, images that trigger envy, loneliness, desire. It keeps feeding you more. Why? Because emotional intensity increases engagement, and engagement increases profit. In the old factory, workers were exhausted by physical repetition. In the new factory, users are drained by emotional repetition. We are caught in cycles of dopamine and anxiety, validation and doubt, engineered by design, not accident. One of the most powerful tools in this system is recommendation algorithms. On the surface, they seem helpful. They suggest what to watch next, what to read, what to buy. But these algorithms don't serve you. They serve the platform's business model. They aren't recommending what's best, they're recommending what's most profitable to show you. This leads to a subtle but serious form of psychological manipulation. Your feed is curated not to reflect your interests, but to shape them. To push you toward behaviors that generate more data, more purchases, more time spent scrolling. And it works. It works better than any propaganda system in history, because it's personalized. The system learns who you are by observing you silently, constantly, relentlessly. Then it reflects a version of you that it can control. You may think you're making choices, but more often than not, you're choosing between options the algorithm selected for you. It's not control through force. It's control through suggestion. Through architecture. Through invisible boundaries. This is what makes digital exploitation so difficult to resist. It's not based on punishment, it's based on seduction. You're not being yelled at by a boss. You're being nudged by a system that knows your weaknesses better than you do. And because the labor is emotional and cognitive, not physical, it's much harder to see. We don't have words for the exhaustion you feel after hours of scrolling. We don't call it work. But it is. You are providing value. You are generating data. You are training algorithms. You're not being paid, but someone else is making money. Let's talk about surveillance. Not the kind with cameras on every street corner, but a more intimate kind. Digital surveillance is woven into everything now: phones, apps, wearables, even smart home devices. Most of it is legal. Much of it is invisible. And it's not just tracking what you do, it's trying to predict what you will do next. That prediction is what advertisers buy. That's what political campaigns target. That's what platforms sell. Your behavior is no longer private, it's a commodity. But here's the kicker: when your future behavior is predicted, it can also be influenced. Not just your next purchase, but your next belief. Your next fear. Your next vote. The line between suggestion and manipulation becomes blurry, by design. We've entered an era where emotional states are not only tracked, but targeted for extraction. Platforms want you angry, anxious, or addicted, not because they hate you, but because those states keep you engaged. Think of outrage culture, conspiracy videos, political rabbit holes. The algorithm doesn't care if the content is true. It cares whether it keeps you watching. It rewards division. It amplifies conflict. It turns attention into aggression, and then sells ads next to the flames. And who's profiting? A small group of corporations that own the infrastructure. They are not just monetizing our emotions, they are shaping them. That's a new kind of power. A form of emotional governance. And what about workers within this system? Not the engineers or executives, but the gig workers, the creators, the freelancers, the content moderators. The people whose livelihoods depend on staying visible, staying relevant, staying monetizable. They're not just working, they're performing. For an audience. For an algorithm. For survival. Their well-being depends on metrics they can't control, decided by systems they can't see, built by people they'll never meet. They are living under algorithmic management, the new digital boss. Cold. Invisible. Unforgiving. This form of labor is lonely. Isolating. Fragmented. There's no lunchroom. No coworkers. No union. Just dashboards, stats, and burnout. And this is where it gets dangerous. Because if you don't see yourself as a worker, you won't fight for labor rights. If you don't see your emotional exhaustion as exploitation, you'll blame yourself instead of the system. That's the genius of it. It's not just invisible labor. It's labor that denies its own existence. We explore how human life itself has been converted into a resource. Not metaphorically. Literally. You're not just online anymore. You are the product. Let's start with a hard truth. In the digital economy, you are not a person, you are a data stream. Every time you move, search, shop, post, or pause, you generate data. That data isn't just recorded, it's harvested, packaged, and sold. It's the raw material of the modern economy. But unlike coal or oil, you never stop producing. You generate data in your sleep. Through your phone. Your smart watch. Your connected fridge. Your car. Even your silence, what you don't click, can be used to train a model. This is more than surveillance. This is data extraction at a civilizational scale. And the most important shift. You don't own the data. The platform does. In the old industrial world, workers were bound to factories. Today, we're bound to platforms, but we don't recognize the chains. Every personal detail, your location, your preferences, your face, your voice, your digital conversations, feed systems you can't see, owned by companies you can't negotiate with. Your clicks train recommendation engines. Your facial expressions train emotion detection AIs. Your medical data helps build predictive health platforms. Your conversations help chatbots become fluent. But you're not credited. You're not compensated. You're not even asked. This is the paradox of the data economy. The most valuable resource is the one most exploited and least protected, you. Let's talk about fragmentation. In this system, you're not treated as a whole person. You're treated as a bundle of behaviors. Your identity is broken down into pieces: consumer habits, demographic segments, psychographic profiles, engagement scores. Each piece is used for different purposes. Your purchase history trains predictive marketing. Your scrolling behavior fine-tunes feed algorithms. Your location data feeds urban analytics and ad targeting. Your typing speed helps detect fraud. Your emotional tone in messages trains sentiment analysis tools. You are reduced to fragments. These fragments are traded, optimized, sold, resold, and plugged into models that will then shape your future behavior. This process has a name: datafication. It's the transformation of human life into quantified data points. It's not inherently bad. Data can help us diagnose disease, plan cities, even prevent crime. But when it's done without consent, without transparency, and without ownership, it becomes exploitation. And it's happening everywhere. Smart cities track pedestrian movement. Retail stores scan faces for customer mood. Schools use surveillance software to monitor student engagement. Employers use AI to monitor keyboard activity, tone of voice, and facial expressions on Zoom calls. Every part of life is being converted into input. Even your memory is no longer yours. Social media platforms store your past, then resurface it at random for engagement. Your photos. Your locations. Your old opinions. We used to talk about privacy. But this goes deeper. This is about agency. About ownership of the self. Here's the deeper danger: this system is asymmetrical. You produce the data. They own the infrastructure. You offer your attention. They collect your value. You live inside the system. They control how it evolves. The data you generate today trains the AI that may replace your job tomorrow. It defines the insurance premium you'll pay, the credit score you'll get, the political messages you'll see, the opportunities you'll be offered or denied. And yet, you have no right to see the models. No ability to correct the record. No path to opt out. This isn't just about exploitation. It's about disempowerment at scale. Now imagine trying to resist this system. It's nearly impossible, because the system has no center. No factory gates to protest outside. No HR office. No boss. Just layers of software, code, and platform policies. And even if you leave one platform, you're still visible through others. Data brokers stitch together your activity across the web, creating shadow profiles. You're visible, traceable, targetable, whether you want to be or not. Resistance becomes difficult when the system is everywhere and the labor is invisible. Let's not forget the emotional impact. Being constantly monitored, scored, nudged, and analyzed creates a persistent low-level anxiety. A sense of being watched. A pressure to perform. And for workers, especially gig workers, digital creators, or customer service agents, this fragmentation turns into burnout. They're not just doing a job. They're managing a persona, competing with metrics, and trying to stay visible in an algorithmic economy that punishes inconsistency. Even outside of work, identity is becoming labor. You're curating your online self for visibility. Likes, followers, and engagement are forms of social capital, but they're also forms of unpaid work. We're living through a strange moment in history, when being becomes working, and existing becomes exploitable. Data power and the global game is about how data has become not just an economic asset, but a strategic weapon. In the 21st century, the nations and corporations that control data don't just predict behavior, they shape the world. Let's begin with a bold statement: data is the new oil. But unlike oil, it doesn't just power industries, it powers decisions. Economic decisions. Political decisions. Security decisions. Cultural decisions. And it's doing so quietly, invisibly, and massively. We're used to thinking of power in terms of territory, armies, GDP. But today, the ability to collect, analyze, and act on data at scale is emerging as the most important strategic capability of the 21st century. And the players who understand this, big tech companies, surveillance states, data-rich corporations are already reaping the rewards. Private companies, public power. Let's look at the global balance of power, not among governments, but among platforms. Take a moment to consider this. Facebook knows more about population-level sentiment than most governments. Google has real-time insight into what billions of people are curious about. Amazon can predict demand shifts before economists do. TikTok's algorithm can shape youth culture in nearly every country on Earth. These aren't just businesses. They are informational empires. And unlike traditional empires, they don't need to occupy land. They occupy minds, markets, and behavioral infrastructure. In past centuries, states would regulate corporations. Today, states are competing with corporations for influence. And often, the corporations are winning. Data geopolitics. Let's talk about China and the United States. This isn't just a trade war. It's a data war, a race for dominance in artificial intelligence, surveillance technology, 5G infrastructure, and behavioral analytics. Whoever builds the best models, whether for facial recognition, predictive policing, or real-time language processing, gains a strategic advantage. China has launched massive initiatives like the social credit system, which combines financial records, online behavior, and surveillance footage to produce a single trustworthiness score. It's a chilling example of how data can be used not just for market prediction, but social engineering. In the US, data control lies more with private companies, but the implications are no less profound. From election interference to pandemic response, we've seen how platforms like Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter can sway public opinion, suppress information, and amplify disinformation, without ever setting policy. Governments make laws. Platforms shape perception. And in an age of infinite information, perception is everything. The rise of data colonialism. The term data colonialism might sound extreme, but it fits. Just as colonial powers once extracted natural resources from foreign lands, today's digital empires extract behavioral resources from populations all over the world. Here's how it works. 1. Platforms expand into developing countries by offering free internet services, like Facebook's free basics or Google's Android systems pre-installed on cheap smartphones. 2. In exchange for access, users unknowingly give away massive amounts of personal and community-level data. 3. That data is analyzed, monetized, and used to refine global algorithms, without the host country ever owning or profiting from the insights generated. This is digital extraction with no taxation, no labor protections, and no sovereignty. It's a one-way pipeline, from the global south to Silicon Valley and Beijing. And just like in colonial times, the most affected populations are often the least empowered to resist. Behavioral governance. What happens when decisions about transportation, healthcare, policing, or education are based not on policy, but on data models? We enter the era of behavioral governance. Let's say a city uses AI to predict crime hotspots. Police resources are deployed based on those forecasts. But the data used may reflect past over-policing of certain neighborhoods, leading to self-fulfilling feedback loops. The algorithm doesn't question the bias, it amplifies it. Or take predictive health systems. Insurers and hospitals may use models trained on data that reflect historical inequalities, skewing access to care based on race, income, or geography. When data becomes the foundation of policy, bias gets embedded into code, and code doesn't negotiate. The result? A system where decisions appear neutral or scientific, but are actually reinforcing deep social divides. Information sovereignty and the struggle ahead. Some countries are waking up to this new reality. The European Union has passed regulations like the GDPR, designed to return some data rights to individuals. India is building a public digital infrastructure aimed at protecting citizen control over identity, finance, and health data. African nations are pushing for data localization, laws requiring that data generated in-country stay within national borders. But these efforts face enormous resistance. Why? Because the companies that benefit from cross-border data flows are deeply embedded in global systems of finance, media, and infrastructure. They don't just use data, they own the highways it travels on. Controlling your own data is no longer just a privacy issue. It's a matter of national security, economic strategy, and cultural survival. The future is up for grabs. So where does this leave us? We are entering an era where the most powerful institutions are not those that make things, but those that know things. Knowledge is power. But data is power on steroids, because it doesn't just reflect reality. It can shape it. From AI warfare to social manipulation, from education systems to global finance, the ability to collect and control data will determine who thrives, and who is left behind. But this future isn't set in stone. It can still be shaped. Governments can challenge corporate monopolies. Citizens can demand digital rights. Engineers can design for ethics over profit. Movements can push for data justice, algorithmic transparency, and collective ownership of digital infrastructure. Because if we don't act, the world will be governed not by elected leaders, but by invisible models, optimizing for interests we never agreed to. EVE explored how human labor has been replaced by data as the core driver of value, how platforms operate as invisible factories, how emotional and cognitive experiences are mined for profit, how human beings have become fragmented digital resources, and how control over data is shaping the global balance of power. Now, the big question: what can we do about it? We live in a world where our lives, our thoughts, movements, habits, and emotions are continuously captured, processed, and monetized. We've seen how this system exploits invisibly, resists accountability, and scales rapidly. But we've also seen something else: the cracks in the machine. People are beginning to question the trade-offs. Movements are forming. Laws are changing. Technologists, activists, and citizens are reimagining what a fair and ethical digital economy might look like. And that's where this story ends, or begins, depending on how you look at it. Rethinking what counts as labor. Let's start with a redefinition. What if we acknowledge that all the ways we engage with platforms, scrolling, commenting, training algorithms, creating content, is labor? Not formal, not contracted, not protected, but still labor. In this economy, if value is being extracted from our attention, our data, our presence, then it stands to reason we should have rights. This opens up the possibility for data unions, where users organize collectively to negotiate with platforms. Platform cooperatives, owned by the communities that use them. Universal data dividends, where the profits from mass behavioral data are shared with the public. Labor classification for creators and gig workers, to ensure fair compensation and protections. This isn't just about fairness, it's about survival in a system that's consuming everything without giving anything back. Privacy is not enough. For years, we've framed the digital conversation around privacy. But privacy is only the first layer. We don't just need to protect data, we need to control it. To decide how it's used, who profits, and under what terms. This is where the idea of data sovereignty comes in. Imagine having real-time visibility into what data is being collected about you. Imagine being able to opt out of certain uses, or license your data under clear conditions. Imagine an economy where users are stakeholders, not just sources of extraction. It's a radical shift from platforms operating like surveillance machines to platforms that operate like public infrastructure. This requires legal reform. But it also requires a cultural shift toward understanding our digital lives not as disposable, but as valuable. Decoding the algorithm. One of the most dangerous aspects of today's system is its opacity. Algorithms decide what we see, how we're ranked, which job we get, which loan we're approved for. But those algorithms are often black boxes. To reclaim agency, we need algorithmic transparency. We need public audits of AI systems used in hiring, policing, healthcare, education. The right to challenge algorithmic decisions. Open standards for fairness, accountability, and explainability. AI systems designed with public values, not just corporate efficiency, in mind. In short, we need democratic oversight of machine power. Because right now, we're living under what some call algorithmic governance, and we didn't vote for it. Building alternatives. If we want to escape the cycle of surveillance capitalism, we have to build systems that don't depend on it. That means funding and supporting public interest technology, platforms that are non-commercial, open source, and community-driven. Decentralized web protocols, tools that return ownership of identity and data to the user. Ethical AI labs, research that prioritizes justice, inclusivity, and human dignity over speed and scale. Cooperative infrastructure, platforms governed by those who contribute value, not just investors. These alternatives exist. But they need support, visibility, and regulation to compete with the giants. Because as long as value is measured only by profit, exploitative models will always win. We need to redefine value itself. The power of collective consciousness. Resistance doesn't always look like protest. Sometimes it looks like awareness. It's choosing not to scroll mindlessly. It's reading terms of service, then refusing platforms that overreach. It's supporting creators directly, rather than relying on algorithmic feeds. It's pressuring governments to act, not with tech-utopian promises, but with grounded policy rooted in human rights. And most importantly, it's talking about these issues, in schools, at dinner tables, in public forums. Because silence is what allows these systems to grow unchecked. And conversation is the beginning of change. Toward a post-data capitalism future. Let's imagine what comes after data capitalism. A world where platforms serve the people, not the other way around. Algorithms are tools, not rulers. Data is shared fairly, protected rigorously, and used responsibly. Digital labor is visible, valued, and rewarded. Tech is a public good, not a private trap. That world won't be easy to build. But neither was industrial capitalism. Neither was democracy. Neither was the internet itself. We're in the early stages of a long negotiation between power and freedom, code and conscience, automation and agency. The outcome isn't predetermined. And that means we still have a say.